6 o'clock, I'll call the February 11th, 2020 With County Board of Supervisors meeting to order. This evening, we have Bishop Chris Madsen from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to offer an invocation. If you would please rise and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pray now, or okay. Our Father in heaven, without heads, we come unto Thee and acknowledge you as our Creator and Father of our spirits. We are grateful for the freedoms in which we enjoy in this country and for the laws in which have been set up for us. May you guide us in the decisions that are made here tonight, and we thank Thee for the citizens that have come out here tonight then as well. May you help us to protect our families from the adversaries and from his distractions and from the ways in he causes mischief in the world. We pray for the gift of the Holy Ghost to be able to help us in our families and with those around us in our community as well. And in our Savior's name, Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
First item on the agenda is citizens' time. We don't have anybody signed up. I know we've had a couple people come in. If anybody would like to speak during citizens' time. Hearing none, I'll close citizens' time. Next on the agenda is the payment of invoices. I'll entertain a motion to pay the invoices as presented.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
So moved. I'll make that motion, Mr. Chair.
Mr. McRoberts made the motion.
I'm sorry, go ahead and I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second. Any invoice, any member want to pull out or any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to pull out 107660 and make sure that that is legitimate.
What page is that on, Mr.?
Page 12 of your agenda.
$107660.
What that is, Mr. Chairman, we receive charges from Fort Chiswell High School for assistance for them to have someone on site during our football games. And Mr. Cook would like to review that and look at that one before you approve that one for payment.
We'll remove that invoice. Any other invoice?
I need to change my motion.
Mr. Barrett, Mr. McRoberts need to amend his motion or?
I believe it'd be best to amend the motion to remove that check.
I will amend it.
They have an amended motion to remove 107660. Do we have a second?
Yes, sir, well, I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair. Mr. Bear, do any other hospitals charge us for that?
To my knowledge, it's been a few years since I have looked closely at it. I do not think that they do.
And what exactly
Rural
is it?
Retreat had not, the last that I recall, George Whip had not, because most of the time, the town teams were organizing through George Whip. But Fort Chiswell had always indicated that they needed to have a supervisor on site at any time we were out there, and have historically always charged the county for the games on site.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll go roll call vote. Mr. Smith?
Aye.
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 Motion passes 7-0.
Mr. Chairman, if I might comment on what I just answered. That is regarding football. I do think on basketball there is some custodial fees that we pay for people being there for custodians in basketball. But This is relating to the football season.
Okay, sounds good.
But I would assume the county takes care of any janitorial services during football.
Actually, the booster clubs typically take care of it, yes.
Even still, my complaint is not so much paying for a custodian. That bill's not for custodian, that's for the athletic director to be there for the entire time.
At his hourly
At his
rate.
hourly rate, which, you
Seems a little
know,
excessive.
they don't need somebody, they need custodian.
Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting from January 28th. Have a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Have a motion, have a second. Any corrections or additions need to be made to the minutes? Any discussion? Hearing none, do a roll call vote. Mr. Terry?
Aye.
That,
Aye.
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 Minutes are approved. Under old business, first thing is appointments.
Mr. Chairman, at the last meeting, you all made a motion to appoint Jeremy Farley to the Apex Authority to assume the position that Kathy Pattison was vacating effective the 1st of March. Since that time, Mr. Doug Hughes has vacated, has resigned from the board immediately. Mr. Farley was at the last meeting attending. I would recommend that you all revise the motion to go ahead and appoint Mr. Farley to the empty seat, if you would, and let him go ahead and start attending those meetings as a member.
Entertain a motion to appoint Jeremy Farley to the Apex Authority effective immediately.
So moved.
Have a motion, have a second.
Second.
Have a motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Smith?
Aye.
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 So appointed.
That still leaves a vacancy for Ms. Patterson's position effective March 1st, but you all can fill it, your committee.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate a candidate for that position. Mr. Barry Arnold.
What was the name again?
Barry Arnold.
Have a motion to nominate Mr. Barry Arnold. Have a second.
I second it.
Have a motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, do a roll call vote. Mr. Terry?
Aye.
That,
Aye.
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 So moved, and he is so appointed. Anything else under appointments? Committee board member, I know we had, planning commission vacancies.
Mr. Chairman, I am still working on my vacancy I have on the planning commission. I should have an answer by our next meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I have an appointment for, I think it's a recreation committee that I had an appointment on.
Okay.
I'd like to appoint Mr. Wayne Joseph Simonis to that seat.
Have a motion to appoint Wayne Simonis to the Recreation Committee. Have a second.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'm going to do a roll call vote. Mr. Smith?
Aye.
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 yeah,
Aye.
He's so appointed. Any other appointments? Mr. Barrett, do you know offhand, besides Ms. Lawson's planning commission, any that we need to?
Offhand, I do not. We will go through the list and confirm it, and if there's any additional things, we will put it on the meeting, put on the next agenda for consideration. Do you know anything, Ms. Collins?
And just for the new board members, I don't know, if you do have somebody to appoint, if you'll get their contact information and email it to Ms. Collins, that way she can get in contact with them rather quickly about the meeting schedule.
There may be a vacancy on Mountain Cap. We'll confirm that.
Moving on, under old business capital improvement plan. Mr. Barry, I know we've discussed this before.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I put this on the agenda last time just for consideration and discussion. and, you know, opportunity for you all to review prior to this meeting. Basically, just lines out capital improvements over the next 5 years. And I would recommend the board approve the capital improvement plan for 2020, subject to any revisions you all may wish to make.
Hearing that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the capital improvement plan as presented.
So moved.
Have a motion, have a second.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I will say, and I think Mr. Barrett, I don't remember if it was a committee meeting or board meeting, this is a living document, and we can go back and revise it as needed. But I think it gives us a good direction where the county needs to head in the next 5 years. Any more discussion? Here now, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Terry?
Aye.
Uh-huh.
Aye.
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 Uh-huh.
So approved, Mr. Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything under other for old business, Mr. Barrett?
I do not have anything under other.
Does any other board member have anything under old business? Moving along to new business. Vitality Farms LLC AFID Performance Agreement.
Mr. Manley is here with us if there's any questions, but basically, this is the APHID, which is the Agricultural and Forestry and Industries Development Performance Agreement for Vitality Farms, which had their announcement Halloween, I think it was like around October, November timeframe, with the mowers, umbargers, and this is just the agreement for them to receive their amount of money from the state, which David confirmed the amount with me, I'm looking for here. It's $25,000, which includes a $25,000 match from the county. And we would recommend that you all approve this agreement so that we can send it in to the Secretary of Agriculture.
Entertain a motion to approve the AFID Performance Agreement.
I'll make that motion.
Have a motion, have a second.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have one question.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I don't have a conflict. I think the board is that Christopher and Susan Moore, Mr.
That is
Mayor.
correct.
This board is my wife's employer at Forest Family Care, although my wife is a nurse practitioner up there.
But it's not Vitality, right? She doesn't work for Vitality.
Correct, okay.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to be safe.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's not that entity. Appreciate it.
yes, sir, thank you.
Any other discussion or question? Hearing none, do a roll call vote. Mr. Smith?
Aye.
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 Approved 7-0. Next is reassessment contract, Walgreens.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, what you have before you, sometime last year, the board had reviewed the property reassessments. The Mount Rogers PDC did a procurement for all counties within its area and brought in various firms. We interviewed those firms. Ms. Barker, the Commissioner of Revenue at that time, went with me to interview the firms. Following to that, Wampler and Eames was selected by several of the localities, including with, has been the company to enter into a contract with. Ms. Barker and Ms. Vault and I met with them. Since that time, we received the contract and gone through the contract and recommend approval of this contract agreement for the property reassessment. This reassessment will probably start later this year and will be effective on January 1st, 2022.
Entertain a motion to accept the reassessment contract.
So moved.
Have a motion, have a second.
Second.
Have a motion in 2 seconds. Any discussion? Mr. Bear, Wamperines is not the company that does the last assessment.
That is correct, sir. Or the one before.
That's my next question.
Yes, sir.
I knew where I was going with that, didn't I? And I do hope they do a much better job and update some of the photos. The past companies we've had. Any other discussion? Hearing none, do a roll call vote, Mr. Smith.
Aye.
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 So,
And Mr. Chairman, if I would, just to let you know, in the process of working on this, I have also been working with the Commissioner of Revenue's office. They would like to advance to a new assessing software within their office. Currently, it is a homegrown system, home-written system. We have met with several companies, we've talked to some companies. We'll be looking at going through, make certain all proper procurement and items in that. But I do see that this being a relatively large expenditure in addition to the reassessment in the next fiscal year. I do see adding a new software in as quite a large expense, but a necessary expense to bring us up to a system that's probably more compatible with reassessment firms and more compatible with our Tyler Munis system.
how old's the system they're currently using?
How old?
It's got pictures of the ark.
I would say probably 20 years. And that's just a guess off the top of my head.
I'd say it's pretty accurate, yeah. But we don't need to take any action.
Do not need any action. I just want to mention that to you all because it will be a large budget item.
Well, and in talking to Ms. Ball, I think she's got some ideas about modernizing some of the way they do things, and it'll fit in good with Tyler Munis, and the county spent the money for the system, and we'll get the most out of it. Financial and capital planning review through Davenport and Company.
Mr. Chairman, discussed it briefly at the last meeting, told you it was getting an updated proposal. We talked about this in the previous, I think, maybe budget committee as well. Davenport and Company has done work for several localities in the area, and they do financial and capital planning review. That's part of the reason also I was wanting to have a capital improvements plan for them to review as well. I would recommend that the board approve hiring of Davenport and Company for this financial and capital planning review.
Entertain a motion to accept the proposal from Davenport and Company.
So moved.
Have a motion, have a second.
Second.
Have a motion, a second. Any questions or discussion?
Second. I've told you I'll turn that up, don't you?
Any questions or discussion on this? And Mr. Bear, I would just ask to kind of give us, you gave us a brief synopsis of what they're going to do, but just a brief explanation of how this will help the county going forward.
What they're good at coming in is coming in, looking at where you are financially, looking at expenses that you want to go, looking at the debt service that you currently have out there. Are there opportunities for refinancing or consolidation of debt or things they can look at? They are aware of the struggles we have with the water fund right now. And are there opportunities that we may be able to take some steps to spread out our water debt to decrease the large amount of water debt that we currently have right now in the process? And then also assist you with looking at these future projects. And if necessary, they can come in and assist you with locating the funding for those projects, if need be. But, basically, sort of give you a bookmark of where you are and to get to where you'd like to go with your capital improvements, steps you would need to take.
Does that bring any questions? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Terry?
Aye.
Huh?
Aye.
So approved. Next is a budget amendment request.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead and address it. I'll thank everybody for their emails and comments today. I appreciate it. I hope that I helped to explain a lot of it to you. I understood your questions. Basically, at the previous meeting, you all agreed to fund the sheriff's IT position out of the general fund. What this is doing a transfer. It's not really a budget amendment, but basically doing a transfer from the position that was in 31021, which is the organizational code that as expenses hit that code, they come out of the police activity fund. So previously, Ms. Bauer's salary was paid out of this 31021, and as she was paid, the expenses came out of the police activity fund. Your all's agreement was that this position that the sheriff plans on hiring would come out of the general fund. So it can be charged to 31021. So what I have proposed was setting up 31028, which was originally the sheriff's IT column before. This keeps the sheriff, the position within the sheriff's office, which is what you all indicated. It would be a sheriff's hire, not a county funded, or it would be a county funded, but it would be within the sheriff's department. So what this is doing is just transferring salary, FICA, all of those expenses away from an account that would charge it to the police activity fund to an account that would charge it to the general fund.
But this 20,000 is coming out of PAF.
No, sir, it's not coming out of the PF. It is coming out of an organizational account that had we paid it out of that, it would be coming out of the PAF. When you transfer this budget to 31028, as the new person gets paid, he that's on right now, will get paid out of the general fund. Their expenses will not be hitting the police activity fund.
So-
If we left it in 31021, those expenses would be coming out of the police activity fund, which is not what you all have agreed to do.
Right, so this money that Mr. Cook's talking about, it'll stay in the PAF.
Yes.
I mean, it's
It's
very
misleading.
confusing because it says reference to the transfer of funds from 31021 PF fund to 310228 sheriff IT. So I mean, if you go by what's written here, it's transferring from the PAF to the sheriff, so you're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, I understand it, and what, and when Casey wrote that, basically what she was doing, I asked her to break down what would be needed, FICA and all those things to move that over. And so she's just meaning transferring of those future expenses is what this is, off of the 31021 police activity fund, which means it would be coming out of police activity fund as these are paid. And then we'll be moving it to 31028, and those expenses would be coming out of the general fund as they're paid. So it is not taking any money from the police activity fund, it's just setting up a code, so as expenses are charged against that account for this new employee, they will come out of the general fund as you all desire.
I have one question, Mr.
Yes.
Mayor. The, something between $29,000 that's left out there, is that money supposed to stay in the PF fund? And can the sheriff choose to spend the money how he wants to spend that leftover money that's already been budgeted?
Anything that's in the PAF fund is certainly under the sheriff's control. Basically, he funds 6 deputies and have been funding the IT position out of the 31021 police activity fund. I think one more position, office person out of there. Currently, I think there's 1 or 2 vacancies in your officers right now that you've got, and the vacancy on that team. So he has plenty of vacancy money sitting right there as it is. I believe when I looked today, through 7 months of the year, salary-wise, you'd only spend about 47% of that budget, which 50% would be for June if you were spending all of it.
Yeah, and I'm good with the explanations as far as the account, setting up the other account and
Yeah.
to get the expenditures out of it. My concern is what Mr. Cook was talking about, this page 2 of this amendment, it was kind of misleading.
I understand, and it is misleading, and I appreciate the questions, I understood the questions, but basically all it is just trying to set up the account for it to be charged correctly and not come out of the police activity fund. So I would recommend approval of this transfer and ask that you all appropriate this amount also, since this will be setting up the new code.
So you need a motion to amend and appropriate?
Do not need to amend, just transfer and appropriate.
I'll make the motion.
Have a motion, have a second.
Second.
Any more discussion? Hearing none, do a roll call vote. Mr. Smith?
Aye.
I'll abstain.
Right?
Sorry, I missed his. I must be going deaf now.
Get them before you know it.
Six ayes and one abstain. Next on the agenda is emergency services.
Mr. Chairman, in front of you is a copy of the emergency services agreement. I know we have Mr. Brady and town representatives here. Excuse me. This, the copy that's in front of you is what I had emailed to you all earlier today. This is the agreement that was adopted by the town of Whitfield last night. Just going down through the agreement, basically, starting with the second, whereas the town desires to provide additional emergency medical services inside and outside of the town's jurisdiction. County desires to provide support for the emergency medical services. Next, just references With County Rescue Squad currently providing services in that area. And then it goes through the therefore. The town would operate a cross-trained fire and EMS that would provide coverage to central area, which is the area designated as With County Rescue Squad. The second item is a request that was recently added, talked about that the county agrees that it shall not designate another emergency response agency with a primary response area within the town's coverage area on the map. The third is that the squad would dissolve and jointly with county convey all right, title, and interest in equipment and personal property owned by the squad. All accounts receivable due to the squad and all debt owed by the squad would be transferred to the town on or before the commencement date. Currently, right now, there is somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000-$40,000 outstanding on 32. There is a debt outstanding at a bank that is offset by cash that they have in the bank to go against it. That second debt can be paid off immediately by them by just taking the money out of the bank and paying it towards that. But their debt's about $32,000. The accounts receivable for everything they build that's out there, obviously there's some that'll be written off, but then what comes in will provide the town the funds to pay off the $32,000 or so in outstanding debt.
So what happens to the 50 that's sitting there in the bank?
It would go to against the loan that is in the bank.
But if they're gonna pay it off the 30, that still leaves them 20, right?
Well, the 50 in the bank would go against the $50,000 loan in the bank. I don't know if it's 40-some thousand or whatever, but there is no money that would come out of it. What they owe against the bank is basically pretty close to exactly what they have in the bank. That was their collateral for that loan.
So that would pay off the unit, correct?
It's not actually tied to the unit. because the unit was in the county's name, but basically, for them, when they got a loan that they used to pay off the additional cost, there was not a lien placed on the vehicle because the vehicle's in our name. They put money in the bank to use as collateral. But yes, that money that's used as collateral would pay off the loan that they have that was associated with the purchase of that vehicle.
At the previous meeting, I know we had the number that we put 50,000 in the bank. We had,
Yes.
because they asked for the
Yeah.
50,000.
Yep.
And that was supposed to be for the loan, but I've heard all kinds of figures dropped around. It was 30 and then it's 40 and I don't know what it is.
Yeah, the loan itself, I look, it's been several, because money in the bank should offset it, and they can pay it off tomorrow and it'd be out of the way. The 30,000 outstanding, 32,000, most all of that is owed to the billing company, that does their billing service for them for fees from way back where they got behind and stopped paying their billing. So the revenues that they collect from this would go towards paying those bills.
Well, for me, before I vote a yea on it, I'd like to see some numbers. I mean, all we've had is numbers thrown around. I'd like to see what they're getting and what it's costing us. I mean, because, like I said, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what we're giving them. I know there's $100,000 that we're giving them right up front. But what else are we giving? How much is it costing us for this to take place? And I haven't seen those
Yeah,
numbers.
basically, that is all that it is costing us. The numbers in the agreement here are what we would be agreeing to pay to the town of Whitfield to start this service. So
Okay, but they're
we are
getting-
not paying anything on the debt or anything that's left over. The town would be absorbing all of that debt, all of those costs. So the only cost associated with us is what's proposed in here is $125,000 the first year, second year, and third year. And then the
That went up.
100,000.
I thought it was 100 for the first year.
No,
No, that's what we
100.
asked for.
Huh?
That's what we asked for.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Barrett, how long, or what's the term of this agreement?
The term under item 7, the initial term of this agreement shall be for 7 years, commencing on March 1st, 2020.
Well, the problem I have is it's a 7-year agreement, but the town has not agreed to a monetary amount on year 6 or 7, said that they would negotiate it, but yet they don't want us to designate an emergency response. Trying to, says shall not designate another emergency response agency with the primary response area within the town's coverage area on the coverage map, and that's in effect for 7 years.
Yeah, item 8 has $125,000 for the first 3 years, $100,000 for the 4th and 5th years. One of the items that we had discussed and sent back was looking at leaving $100,000 for years 6 and 7. I did talk with the town today, but we have town representatives here, and if you'd like, Mr. Chairman, they may be able to explain why they were not willing to agree to that.
Mr. Chairman, I would request that we hear from anyone who has any information so that we can, this has been going on, it started with the Fire and Rescue Committee probably 9 months ago, so, you know, any information that anyone has, I would really recommend that we hear it.
Let me ask a question before we get up there. How much do we give them last year? 72, 3,000?
Basically, between, this is fire and rescue, between fire and rescue, it was somewhere in the $72,000, $73,000 range.
Mr. Bloomfield, if you,
Thank you. I'm Mark Bloomfield. I'm town councilman, and I'm on this EMS group that has been working on this project. And I'm actually representing town council in this discussion this evening. To kind of go back here a little bit, you know, the town is extending a hand to try to take care of all county citizens. I'm a county citizen, and I'm a town citizen, but we're willing to go outside And this is a very big project. We have what we think may be some estimates and cost recovery and all that kind of stuff, but we don't know. We don't really know what this is going to cost us, and we're already staffed up. Incidentally, you may or may not know, we're hiring a consultant to help us locate and spec out a new fire and EMS station, which is going to be north of $5 million for sure. So we're really putting a lot of risk out here on our own, on the town citizens. And we're pretty much set that we actually didn't want to do a 7-year agreement. We're fine with that. But we're not really willing to expose town citizens, the town budget, without some ability to come back and try to relieve an issue if there is an issue. If there's not an issue, fine. If we're able to cost recover on the, pretty much break even with what investments are being made here by you folks, we're fine with that. But we're going way above and beyond trying to help you solve a problem and us solve a problem. You solve a problem outside town limits and us solve a problem inside town limits. And you guys, we all know, I'm not an expert in this, but I know that there is a weakness in the fire and EMS program in the county, outside the town. And we know that we're already starting to see extra calls that we're having to answer on mutual aid. And they're not necessarily fire calls, they're EMS calls. And so that's going to continue to happen. And as soon as everybody realizes that the town has a 24-hour department and a call comes in somewhere else and somebody doesn't want to get out of bed to get it, we're going to end up having to take it. And probably even outside this, you know, there's the basically third of the county, middle of the county. We're going to be most likely outside that area. So, you know, we're just by even considering putting this on our town citizens, we're doing the right thing for everybody. And I think you guys should just help us get this done. And I mean, it's not that big a deal. We're doing all the work and you guys are putting in a little bit of money. So I didn't mean to get on a soapbox, but this is a big, big deal for us to put on our town citizens.
And it could be a big, big deal for us to put on the county citizens, because in year 6, if we can't reach an agreement, then we don't have any ambulances, we don't have a rescue squad building to cover out in the code, Speedwell. You know, we have to basically start from scratch.
Well, in year 6, excuse me, but in year 6, the ones that are there now aren't going to be any good. I mean, we're going to have already have had to buy new ones, or you would have to buy new ones at the time, or whatever. I mean, so that's really not, in these in my mind, that would not be an issue.
Well, I think it will be an issue if we don't reach an agreement, because right now.
Right, oh, yeah. Yeah, because we're going to move forward, you're right.
And, you know, I'll just be honest with you, the good faith negotiation, I don't feel like this whole thing has been good faith, because this is the first conversation we as a board have had about this, you know.
Well, that would not be not good faith on our part, because we're not in control of the agenda.
I mean, me personally, I would like to see a joint meeting months ago between the town and the county.
We kind of wondered about that too.
We have them, sir.
No,
With the
Not
county
between
and
the board,
town?
not between the board.
not with the board.
Not
No,
the, yeah,
yeah.
Rescue squad.
like a joint governing bodies type thing. You know, I mean, that, it's kind of beyond that now, because we have staffed up, we're ready to go, and we're burning cash like crazy right now, trying to get everybody trained and ready to go, so that the very first day, in fact, we're already probably answering some co-calls or something, because some of the EMS people work for us now. So, I mean, it's really about the citizens. And we're trying to remember that, and we're trying to be good neighbors, good partners. And I don't think we've done anything in this discussion between the EMS committee and Stephen and those of us on the committee. I don't think we've done anything here that would be not in good faith, because we're the one, you know, we're spending a ton of money.
Yeah, and then the discussions that have gone on from last year and this year, I mean, part of this, them taking over all the records and everything else, that does help, in moving all those expenses on. You know, I think the primary issue that I heard from most people was just coming down to this year 6 and 7.
Yeah.
The town explained to me today, they just, you know, they just don't want to commit to that if they, you know, want to look at it in those 2 years and see where they are. You know, if all expenses are being covered, which I don't know that they will be, and especially with your debt service on your building being in there as well.
Sure.
Why are we going with 7 instead of 5?
That's what I was gonna say.
Well, we would have preferred 5.
I mean, at the 6th and 7th year, right now, it can get dumped back on us, because we can't agree on a price, and we can't even try to start one, because we're still under contract.
Well, and basically at that point in time, if the agreement's not reached, I mean, then you've got the terms to terminate the agreement, or the section there about, what was it, 96 months. Yeah, the number 7, the agreement shall expend additional unless either party terminates it by giving written notice at least 6 months prior to the end of the then current term.
You know, then we
You would
go,
have 6 months to buy the equipment or whatever you need.
right, and then that goes to what Mr. Chairman was talking about, is putting the burden back on the county citizens.
Right.
So,
Yeah. But if we're in trouble,
no,
I mean, you know, you can't expect us, if for some reason this gets to be a real problem and we can't collect from, you know, on this cost recovery from the calls, and we'll know where those calls are and where the collections are and happening, and if we're really losing money on this deal, serving the county, then you can't expect us not to come back and say, hey, please invest a little bit more in the other county citizens and help us continue this service, because we're really about the service. This is just about negotiating money right here, but it's really about taking care of people.
We agree, we all wanna take care of people, but if you guys can't properly manage your system, you can't come back to the county and ask us to foot the bill for that.
Well, who says we're not gonna properly manage it? It still could be a
I'm not
cost
saying you're not
issue.
gonna properly manage it, but that's what you said, if it's losing money, you're coming back to us for more money.
Because we do not know, and you don't know, and nobody's had the experience doing this yet in this magnitude, in this total space of how the costs are gonna happen. And we're only talking about EMS now at this point. We're not talking about asking, I mean, we're not talking about losing money on our fire side. We're talking about if we can't, if it is too expensive for us to provide, not too expensive, if we can't reasonably break even in 5 years, then is it us? Or is it the fact that insurance companies don't increase their payback rates? Or we have citizens out there who have no insurance and they can't pay, and we have to absorb those things. It's not unreasonable for us to partner here for 5 years and see how that works. We're not asking you if we lose a ton of money the first year or the second year or third year. If it's the trend, we're saying we want to come back. And we're pretty firm on, I mean, we really have to. We can't ask the town budget, which is our town tax dollars, to fund this in a deficit indefinitely. And we have the professional people here to manage this project. So I don't feel like it's going to be a mismanagement of resources. It's going to be about scarce resources if it's a problem. So
With the management they have, they should have the advantage of being able to have better collection rates than what our volunteer rescue squads have right now. Number one, they got a staff that's reporting to council, I won't say board, but reporting to council, and they want to be following up on that. I mean, there's still going to be lots of write-offs and charges of what's not collected. But with no offense to any of our volunteer agencies that are running it, it does make a difference when you've got that structure set up and the accountability of the individuals under you to be trying to recoup as much of the cost as possible in the process.
and one of the things that we're really concerned about is that territory, just inherently, because of conditions out there, expanding. Just just expand, just because we've said through mutual aid that we'll respond. And so that could become as other, unless things, the environment changes, we're very likely to have a significantly increased call volume. We wouldn't be so nervous about it if the call volume wasn't going to go any more than the 3,000 or so calls, that combined calls that we take a year. But what if it, again, through the environment, changing the environment, what if it becomes 5,000 calls a year? What if we have to go buy another rescue squad? Which, I mean, there's just a lot to this. And this is, we've already taken steps to protect the town. We're going to do that. We're at a crossroads here, and the time is very short, where we're going to have to go secure squads. If we're not going to meet, if this agreement's going to be protected in a negotiation, then we're going to have to do something else, because we're already committed.
And one thing, understand exactly what you're saying, Mr. Bloomfield. For us, we understand we may only be a time frame away from Rural Retreat saying the county needs to run Rural Retreat, or Lead Mines needs to say we can't make it. And so the county could be looking at the same situation you are in the future of not having fits, and those areas don't have the call volume that you will have the luxury of having here. So with you all going to fully paid service and improved services, it's going to put more stress on our volunteer agencies to remain as is. So the county could be in a similar situation in the future of looking at needing additional funds to do those.
Sure.
So,
Oh, I'm sure you will. There's no doubt. Because that's just the way the world's going. So as I understand it, everything's going to a paid system because the volunteers just aren't there. And the call volumes are so much higher. And the interstates are there's so many more wrecks on the interstate. So many more things are happening that, the traditional volunteers, you might get called out a couple times a week. But now it's like every day for some of them. So anyway, but, I think you're taking minimal risk, and we're taking a lot of risk. And so I think, I would hope that you would, again, let us be good partners. Let us create a model that maybe has some future as a partnership.
and you've got a couple options here. Obviously, you could accept what they're proposing. You could revise it back to 5 years, but then in year 6, you may be in a similar situation of what you're going to do. If they decide the model's not working for them, and they don't want to cover out in the county any longer, they come back and say, we can't cover out in the county, then you've got to look at how you expand Rural Retreat or Lead Mines to cover those areas, which is going to mean locating something centrally in the process or starting your own agency at that point in time. So.
That risk is going to be there either way we go, from my standpoint. Whether it's 6, 8, 5, that's a real risk for us.
And frankly, when this is going to be successful, I feel like it is personally, I think, with all that we've done. And it may be that we're going to be back here talking about how do we fit into that piece as partners. If we've been good partners all along, maybe there is some way that we can envision together how to take care of the citizens as these things come about. It's not a promise, of course, but I mean, it's when this is my second year on council, and when I first sat down and was told that if your house caught on fire, we probably couldn't put it out, is when I got really committed to taking care of these issues in town. And now we have an opportunity to help county citizens with trying to minimize our risk in doing it, but help everybody. And this is kind of a thing that, as a citizen, I want to see happen. So everybody's assured. That's the only, that's the biggest. I'm lecturing everybody, but my feeling and my position, my most important responsibility is the health, welfare, and safety of the citizens. And I think it's probably yours too. It's the number one thing. And you got a professional group here willing to help you and experiment with a partnership to get this done, so.
And we all know Wythe County Rescue Squad has continued to have its troubles. They've got their current financial troubles. Mr. Brady and the town have hired a large number of their staff away in the process. So they're going to have issues continually to operate. We are going, to need a service like this to help cover it in the town and in the county area. So
We're gonna have 33 cross-trained fire and EMS? Yeah, you talk to the project.
So, Mark Brady, Fire Chief, hopefully not too distant future, Fire and Rescue Chief. Currently, right now, we did hire a few of Wythe County Rescue Squad employees. I can say that although we're in this predicament because of us wanting to add EMS, our staffing right now, we are currently staffing Wythe County Rescue Squad. Meaning they are able to staff one medic unit with their employees on their payroll. The second medic unit is being staffed by our employees that are on our payroll. And we're doing that so that no citizen feels the effects of this merger. What I will tell you is that the Wythe County Rescue Squad's employees that are on their payroll, 3 out of 4 of them work for the town of Wytheville Fire Department. And we are doing everything we can to schedule so that we know that that second medic unit is going to be staffed, because what they were running into is people just weren't showing up for work. They just weren't coming. Or they're supposed to be there on Saturday, they wouldn't be there on Saturday, they'd show up Monday, but what are you going to do, fire them? No, we need to staff a unit. So we're picking those pieces up. A little over a year ago, you had a fire chief from Max Meadows say that he was 1.5 years away from needing career staffing. I don't know where that is currently. You have a crumbling fire and EMS system right now that's going on in the county. Who's going to pick up the brunt of that? We are. And we're currently doing it. We're going to Max Meadows for lift assists. We're going to other locations in the department to back people up just like we're supposed to do. We're Wythe County citizens. It's the right thing to do. I don't know what Lead Mine's financial situation is, but what I advise our elected officials is roughly at the 5-year mark, let's sit down and talk about it. If Lead Mines has issues like Wythe County Rescue Squad does, and all of a sudden we're picking up, instead of running 50% of the call volume, we're starting to run 55 to 60% of all of Wythe County, isn't it fair that we sit down at the table and talk and figure out what we can do to make this better? That's all we're trying to do. That's why that 6 and 7 years negotiating is there, because we don't know what Lead Mines is going to do tomorrow. We don't know what they're going to do in 4 years. We don't know what Max Meadows will be. But in the meantime, as you're trying to put career staff together, if that were to be the case, we're going to be the one answering the calls. And we don't have any problems doing that. But it's only fair that we come back to the table and at least talk about it. And that's all we're asking for the capability to do. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Mr. Mayor, is there a staff recommendation?
My recommendation is that we enter into an agreement with the town of Wytheville for this. There's been some give and take, and I don't know that any side's going to be entirely happy as to where they're going. What the town adopted was not exactly what we wanted for the 6th and 7th years. The rest of the issues, I really think that they are covering, takes care of the issues we were concerned about the records and the history of it, where we were going. Financially, I like being locked into year 6 and 7 of knowing exactly what we're looking at. At the same time, I understand year 6 and 7, at that point in time, we may still be with the Royal Tree Rescue Squad and the Lead Mines Rescue Squad. We may have a with EMS up and running at that point in time. We may be having worse financial problems on covering our side of it than what the town is having at that point in time. And it may not be feasible for us to come in and offer any additional assistance at that point in time for what we're doing. And the town will look at it and hopefully be able to see that, you know, we're suffering the same issues they're having, but we're not covering costs. If we're covering all of our costs out there and they're covering their costs out there, then maybe it's, you know, a lesser amount here that's needing to be covered in the process. I do feel that we have got to proceed with an agreement and work on the dissolution of Wood County Rescue Squad to provide better service to our citizens in our area. I will leave it up to the board for, you know, decisions. You could change 6 and 7 to the $100,000, but based on what Mr. Bloomfield's saying, the town's not willing to accept that agreement. You could leave it as worded, and proceed on that agreement. I'm trying to have a special call meeting between the two boards as quickly as possible. But March 1st is a good guideline and a good goal to get this up and running. That's 2 weeks out, 2.5 weeks out. It's with County Rescue Squad, it's currently making their current payroll. No guarantee they'll be able to make their next payroll. In the process, they are tracking their funds coming in. So the sooner with Ville Fire and Rescue is up and running, then the better service you're providing to the central area of the county.
Mr. Chairman, I have a recommendation. Let's approve this agreement. I mean, I have studied it. I have worked on this. I can't even begin to tell you how many conversations I've had with the town. I realize that maybe with the change of the board on January 1st, a lot of it was lost in communication. And I know a lot of the new board members aren't up to speed on every detail, but I can assure you that I've worked on every detail. If you all don't feel comfortable with the years 6 and 7, then I'm okay to look at a 5-year agreement. But like Mr. Bear said, it doesn't really change things very much because we're still going to have to look at years 6 and 7 and so on. So I think it's a wonderful thing for the citizens, and I just hope that we're able to come to an agreement instead of stretching it out further and further. That's just my take on it.
Does anybody else have any discussion?
I got a question. I mean, number 10 says that this can be terminated by either party 30 days.
In the event of a material breach.
Okay, so explain that one to me then.
We don't pay.
But what about
We don't-
them?
we don't-
What if they're not running calls out in the county?
Then
is
that would be a
breach on their
material,
part?
that'd be a material, I mean, that's up to
So
definition
that
really,
means- That
but
means if they decided not to run calls out in Witt County, we'd say we want to cancel his contract, but then we got to go back and buy a new ambulance.
Well, they would be in breach, and our ambulances are provided to them with the understanding they would be carried, going out in the county to cover this.
It's actually a state regulation. That 30 days breach is a state regulation. When we turn in for our application to the state to run EMS or to have a designated EMS license, we have to include in there our response area. So it's basically a requirement from the state to say, listen, after 30 days, if there's any breach of contract, then both parties can, or one of the parties can pull out. That's all.
So I think it's a good point that Mr. Horny's brought up. If you all breach the contract, the equipment comes back to us. Is that what I understood?
That would be up to some kind of negotiation or settlement. I mean, the vehicles are being titled to the town. They're going to carry the insurance, they're going to carry the risk of the vehicles. If they breach in year two for some odd reason, it doesn't sound like that's any intent on their part, but if some odd reason, some breach occurs, then we would have to enter negotiations with the town to figure out how do we create our own department? What are they willing to give back to us because they breached the agreement? Either way, if the agreement fails, you guys are spending a lot of money to create a new department, especially buying ambulances, and then potentially you would be going after the town for some kind of damages because they didn't honor their 7-year agreement and we had to buy this ambulance, possibly.
And the other option is, at that point in time, you may look at third-party entities coming in as well to help cover the area, whether it's public-private partnership or just hiring out private entities to come in and do it.
We're not in the habit of breaching our agreements, so.
Yeah, no, I'm not insinuating you are, but we have to weigh everything.
The one change that I would request, and I talked, or I guess emailed a little bit with Chris Menerick about it today. We talked about, under the property, there were 2 ambulances, the one antique ambulance, which the town would agree to, and I've got a little bit of revised language, just basically that would be for historical/museum purposes only, not to be sold or scrapped, and that's what Mr. Menerick sent as well to us. There's one Ford Expedition that not 100% certain you all want, not 100% certain we want.
You
but
can have it.
it does have some value that could be used for where they're doing some work on the towers for the county and other uses if we wanted to keep that here. But I'll let that be up to the board to decide on that. But that would just be one exhibit.
There's also a van that you wanted to.
Yeah, the van we are going to keep, because the van could be possibly, Lead Mines Rescue Squad would like to look at it because it works on the New River Trail because it's narrow enough to go across the bridges. And so that one, they don't want, we could look at it, and if it's worth using, Lead Mines may like to have that added to their fleet.
Well, I think we retained the expedition for what we talked about with tower work, some of the places, Darling, Aspen. Any other discussion?
The thing about not doing another emergency response in the area.
In town of Whitfield only.
Well, if this contract gets breached, is that null and void, so that we could do one?
If they breach, it's off the table. You can do whatever you want. We'll have a fight about it at some point, but, you know, in the end, somebody's pointing the finger at somebody else.
I mean, I don't think they're gonna breach.
The relationship
Don't get me wrong,
falls
but
apart.
I'm just trying to make
We
sure.
figure it out. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't want, something happened that it goes down the wrong road, and then they say, well, y'all ain't got no choice, because you can't send an ambulance out there.
Right.
And going back to what you said, Mr. Horn, and number 2, it says, agrees that shall not designate another emergency response agency with a primary response area within the town's coverage area on the coverage map. And then when you look at the coverage map, it, of course,
It goes into the county. It's the town limits in the county, which is what the Wythe County Rescue Squad's covering right now. Yeah. And that does include some county area. But if they fail to provide that service and there's some breach allegation, then our commitment to not bring in outside help goes away too. And then we fight about it in court for 10 years or however long it takes to get through that mess, if that were to happen. But if,
Remember too, we have to answer these calls if, for no other reason, we need the money flow coming in to try to recover the cost of all this stuff that we've invested in. So it's not very likely that we're gonna decide not,
I agree, but if a year or 2 years down the road, y'all realize that you're answering calls out in the county and not getting paid for them when you are in the ones that live, and you say, well, we're losing money by going out there, we're not going out there no more.
Well, we
I mean,
wouldn't say
that's
that.
something
We'd
we gotta
come back
look
to
at.
you in year 5 and say, we would like you to help us
Right.
cover these costs, is what we're gonna do.
We don't have any data,
I understand that.
you know, so.
I understand.
You know, that's inevitably what we're saying. At the end of 5 years, we'll have data that we'll be able to say, hey, we ran this many times the lead mines, we ran this many times the speed well, we ran this many times wherever. And that's inevitably all we're trying to say for year 6 and 7 is, once we have data, let's all come to the table and see. It might be right. Hopefully it is right. And we don't have to go through this again. Or we can just continue on.
They
But
could
at
be
least we'll
doing,
have data.
they could be doing better than expected and lower that cost. Unlikely, but possibly, you know.
Highly unlikely.
Coach,
Yeah.
where have you been?
So,
Well, have you ever seen that happen?
The other thing, we're also, we discussed this today, we're more than happy to provide financial data to you guys at the end of the fiscal year, once we have all the audit stuff and everything. I mean, we're not gonna be hiding anything, and we're under the same kind of accounting rules you are. You gotta account for things in the right places. So we're more than happy to share that information. It's public information anyway, but, yeah.
Well, and you touched on earlier about the vehicles by year 6 and year 7. You know, they're gonna be in the lot. And if Chief Brady wants to go out and buy 2 $500,000 top of the line ambulances,
We're not gonna let it.
you just stood up here and said you were building a $5 million building. I mean,
So who's gonna build a $400,000 or $500,000?
well, I'm just saying, you know, what's the county's part on that? You know, you see our fire stations and rescue, we don't have $5 million buildings out there.
Well, you're not trying to house 33 people either, 24 hours a day. I mean, it's.
Mr. Chairman,
equipment and stuff, but anyway.
I make a motion, we approve this agreement minus the Ford Expedition. However, we need to amend that.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
Leaving it at 7 years or changing it to 5?
My motion is to leave it at 7 years.
Yeah, I think at 7, it's gonna be,
It's gonna be the same.
Half
difference.
dozen
I mean,
one.
At the end of the 5 years, you're either gonna have to renegotiate one way or the other.
I think either way you look at it, it's pretty much the same.
It would be kind of nice, although we didn't want to go to 2 years.
We're trying to have, we've got a motion on the floor.
Excuse me.
Any other discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Terry?
Aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
So approved.
Mr. Chairman, there's a second item under there, with County Resolution 2020-02. We've all been the same matter, so before Mr. Brady then walk out the door. This is basically establishing Withfield Fire and Rescue as an emergency response agency designation within our document that is attached there. The designated emergency response agency policy would recommend approval of resolution 2020-02.
Entertain a motion to approve with County Resolution 2020-02.
So moved. I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, do a roll call. Mr. Smith?
aye.
Aye.
Aye. Then, with County, is the designated emergency response agency policy, is that an action item?
That's what you all just took care of, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else under that? I'm trying to scroll down through.
No, sir, I do believe that covers all of it.
Next item on the agenda is the Apex Authority request.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, at their meeting on February 4th, currently the Apex Authority requested that the county become their fiscal agent for human resources and payroll. They are currently have their payroll services contracted through an accounting firm, which they are paying for monthly. We currently provide this service for the New River Regional Water Authority and the Virginia Industrial Advancement Alliance. Basically, we process their payroll. They sign up under our insurance. We work with them on the VRS program and all of that. And then we invoice those entities back for their charges associated with that. So it is not coming out of county fund dollars, it's still being charged to those entities. This was discussed when they were first forming, and actually sort of recommended as a lower cost alternative for them, but at that point in time, their board was, I guess, wanting to be independent and do it separately. Since that time, their board has been talking about it, struggling with some of their human resources side of it, and would like to have the Board of Supervisors agree to be their fiscal agent for their human resources and payroll.
So this means that those three people out there become county employees?
They would not be county employees. They would still be authority employees, but we would just process their payroll for them. New River Regional Water Authority has 6, 7 full-time employees. They are still New River Regional Water Authority. The authority has the ability to hire and fire them. They just run their payroll through our office instead of having to do an outside firm to do it. The same thing with Josh Lewis, who you all met last week, Virginia Industrial Advancement Alliance. His staff of 2, the county processes their payroll, but they are still an independent authority's employees. The JIDA used to run theirs through the town of Whitfield. I do not know, do you all still run yours through the town?
Right before I started, we ran our own, and then they contracted the January, maybe before I started, a minute ago with the town.
Yeah. So the JIDA is still their own authority, but the payroll just is processed through the town.
So would
The
you,
only additional cost to staff would just be, it will take additional time. I mean, it does add 3 people to our payroll to process. 2 of them are basically salary, 1 of them is hourly. And then if we have a part-time person come in, they would have to come in and fill out the paperwork with Ms. Collins and send that in.
What about the event-based staff? They hire part-time?
If it's contracted type staff, that would still be an AP. But if they do bring in, you know, if they hire Scott and Jean to come in and work on the event, then they would be coming to us to at least sign up as part-time employees. They would submit their pay sheet in and they would get paid that way. But like, they've been using like FFA or clubs to park vehicles. They pay them as just a check to the FFA group. Those would not be run through us.
so it calls out human resources, so they would be under the same policies as county?
Yes. We would need to amend to just add their job descriptions into our policies as it is, but other than that, they would follow our policies.
If we approve this 6 months from now, you're not gonna come back and ask for another person to help with our human resources.
I'm asking for that anyway. Ms. Collins would love additional help on the human resources side of that. But no, during the budget times, we will be talking about staffing, but not because of anything on this situation.
You had mentioned the job descriptions. Can we go ahead and amend that as we do this tonight?
Let me get them from them and do it. What I would like to do is do this, like, if you all are willing to approve it, effective March 1st, or as soon thereafter as possible to get in place. Because we'll need to work out changing over the insurance and moving them to our insurances and get all those things set up. And we need to do it either March 1st, March 16th, or April 1st to do it in the payroll breaks.
Who's taking the hit for VRS?
Well, the authority itself would be paying that 5% into it for the VRS.
Are they aware of that?
Well, I have talked with them about the VRS, yes. That one of the shortfalls that they've had was they had, when they were hiring their employees, they talked about setting up a retirement plan for their employees, and to date, they still have not set up any type of simple IRA or anything else for their employees, which is something that they had indicated that they would do and needs to be set up.
Entertain a motion to accept the request as presented.
I'll make that motion.
Have a motion, have a second.
Second.
Have a motion, a second. Any more discussion or questions? Here none, do a roll call vote. Mr. Smith?
Aye.
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 Yeah.
Aye.
So approved. Next on the agenda is reports, Economic Development Committee.
I don't remember who was chairman of that group, but I'm glad to cover it if you need me to.
I wasn't here, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I'll be glad to cover it.
Congratulations, Mr. Terry.
That's what happens when you miss a meeting.
Oh, that is what happens.
Mr. Terry,
Happens to me a
cover
lot.
this one?
Yes.
Would you cover
Hey,
that?
yeah.
Since I wasn't present.
What you have before you is Seven Sisters project agreements. Previous board had had negotiations with them on this. Mr. Manley sent me the actual performance agreements. In January, we needed to get an indemnity agreement with the town in place in the process. So what you have before you, first of all, is an indemnity agreement associated with this. And let me explain all of it. Basically, you have a performance agreement, which is a loan. The Tobacco Commission will provide a loan to us, in essence, going to the company of $15,000. The parameters within it require the company to pay that loan back, but because the Tobacco Commission gives things to counties and not directly to the companies, we are listed on it as a debtor. On the performance agreement, that is a grant of $15,000. We receive the grant, pass the grant on to the company, in this case, the Seven Sisters Brewery project. They have to meet certain requirements, job and capital investment. If they do not meet those requirements, then there is a repayment requirement. And the Tobacco Commission comes to us for that repayment because they gave us the money. The town's indemnity agreement agrees to hold us harmless should the loan not be paid back by Seven Sisters Brewery, or should they not meet their performance things for the grant. They're already up and running. Mr. Manley does not anticipate any problems with them, and I'll let you come up and speak if you'd like to address any of these, sir.
Unless there are specific questions.
But my recommendation would be first to adopt the indemnity agreement, and basically that is just an agreement with the town that they will hold us harmless should the company breach either of these two performance agreement contracts. And then I would recommend approval of the performance agreements separately afterwards.
So moved.
Second.
Entertain a motion to adopt the indemnity agreement coming from committee. It doesn't need a second.
So moved.
Any question or discussion? Here to do a roll call vote, Mr. Smith.
Aye.
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 Yeah.
Aye.
Next item is performance agreement loan, Mr. Chairman.
So moved.
Entertain that second. Any discussion? You're killing.
We're just trying to speed up this
You're messing my
process.
groove up.
It didn't take much.
That was good.
Mr. Terry.
Aye.
Ah.
Aye.
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 And the last one is the performance agreement for the grant.
Coming from committee, does need a second. Any discussion? Mr. Smith.
Aye.
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 Yeah.
Aye. Aye.
Board Supervisor reports, Mr. Terry.
Don't really have anything at this time. I did have a citizen, Mrs. Green. She lives out in the cove, and she reached out and wanted to know if we could potentially look at providing any kind of trash dump facility out that way, Mr. Bayer.
Out in the cove.
Out in the cove section. She said there's a lot of people that have reached out
approximately, probably 14 or 15 years ago, the subject was discussed and looked at putting something out there, but ultimately ran into some complaints about locating a convenience center out in that area, and at that point in time it was dropped. It's something that we could look at if we would put a center out there, we would have to go back and also amend our agreement with our current hauler, because he would be picking up from a different center and all that in the process. It was looked at and ultimately decided there was not the best option was just to keep using either the 52 or then we located the one down at the Kent's Lane and used it.
Anything else, Mr. Terry?
That's all I have at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Horning,
I don't have anything this time.
Mr. McRoberts?
I did have a call. Some lady called me about the windmills, and I turned it over to Mr. Bear. And I don't know what he told her, because I ain't talked to him since. So he can explain that to you. And I also have another one, but I'll leave it to Jamie. He can take care of it.
I got you covered, come on.
It's actually solar panels, not windmills, but same concept, green energy. You all may remember back a few months ago, there was a request down near Jackson's Ferry substation for confirming that there were no zoning requirements for a solar farm down there, which you all approved. There were no zoning requirements. I believe the company is looking at their proceeding with their development down there, and the individual has called and just expressed concerns about the future of solar panels being located in Wythe County and taking up agricultural land and prime agricultural land and site visibility of them and all that. I did explain to her what's previously come to the board and what we have talked about that we don't have without the zoning or whatever. There are no regulations regarding those. And she just wanted to express her concerns that she felt like we needed some way of controlling those. So I did talk with her, Mr. McRoberts, had a good conversation with her. It may have been yesterday.
Thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Oh, no problem.
Ms. Lawson?
I don't really have anything at this time. I will say thank you to the staff for setting up everything for our training in Richmond. It was very nice. It was great training. The chair, vice chair training was also great. So thank you. I know Martha goes to a lot of trouble to get all that organized. So it was very worthwhile. We just need to put in a budget a van so that we can travel to a meeting. It's something reliable. But that's all I have. Thank you all.
Mr. Cook?
How much time do I have, Mr. Chairman?
I had a call from you on purpose, Mr. Smith.
No, I have.
Tell me something about that seat.
It must be. I have several things. One, I wanted to check on, I want to keep the broadband in front of us. I know that that's an issue throughout the county, and I don't want to lose sight of that, as well as the water, which we've already mentioned the water earlier. So the one at Coy was referring to, Monday, February 17th, some citizens has invited all of us to a meeting at the Fort Chisholm Methodist Church right across from the high school to talk about a possibility of a library in the Fort Chisholm area or the eastern side of the county. So if you're available, please attend that. I know I'm going to be there. I know Coy's going to be there. Stacy's already committed, but anybody else that wants to be there, Monday the 17th.
At what time?
7.
7.
Can we do that?
Well, as long as there's only.
Go, you just can't.
I did
So
ask
that's-
her.
If I might, Mr.
Explain that.
Yeah, Mr. Vaught's probably familiar with it. Several years ago, the Community Rural Retreat did a similar type thing. They had they formed a group, Friends of the Rural Retreat Library, and their goal was to expand library services to the western end of the county. They formed a group. They began doing their fundraising. They acquired property, and then agreed to provide it to the library after its improvements and things on it. So certainly in the Planning Commission's capital improvements input sessions they had over a year ago, there was quite a few comments from the eastern end of the county about people interested in starting a library. And I think part of what we said is it needs to be a grassroots effort and people trying to come together to try to come up with a way of doing it. So glad to hear that the process has started.
Yeah, I mean, from talking to the lady that I spoke with, they're well on their way from what I'm hearing. I don't know about you, Mr. McRoberts, what you've heard. They've got quite a bit going on. The other thing I know, Mr. Bauer, we talked about this on our way up, but the issue on Flatwoods Road down in just a mile or two up above the shot tower, if you can check on that for me. And then one that's been a big topic, and I've kind of overlooked it, and people's been reminding me of it, but the parking ride at Fort Chiswell. We can see about getting lights around that parking ride. There's a lot of people uses it. It's trashed up pretty bad from time to time, but the security of that with lights would help us if we can get lighting down there.
I brought that up last year, but I don't remember if we ever got a response back from VDOT, did we?
Not a good response. I talked about it, I've seen the one at Salem, I've seen the improved one at Christiansburg, and I've asked, can we at least get minimal improvements there, maybe better pavement, at least have some lighting on that. Was unsuccessful at that, but I will do a follow-up with Mr. Fowler on that and see what steps we can take, because we can certainly have the sheriff's office run by and do the cleanup of trash, but it is a very highly used center and it needs to be improved. Maybe not to the level of the others, so we don't have the space to do this part of it, but it does need improvements there.
When you talk to Mr. Fowler, and I put Chief Deputy Foster on the spot, I know he got a call the other day about a gentleman that parked there to go to work and come back and noticed his vehicle sounded funny, and by the time he got home, he looked up under it and somebody cut his catalytic converter off. Now, when somebody's laying up under a vehicle in the dark, the police cars drive by all night long and they're not gonna see that. That's,
So you're saying to ask the sheriff's office, turn the spotlights on so they go by it?
well, people in ministry don't seem to like it.
That's it. I'll bring, it has been brought up before, and I will bring that up with Mr. Fowler and see if there's anything that can be done for improvements there.
Okay, and speaking to that, when you speak to him, check on Hager Springs and Cartersville Heights. As far
Still
as,
no improvement on the potholes?
well, I haven't been out there, so I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
I'll look at that sometime this week. And then the last thing I got, I know I mentioned it to several people, and I was actually calling it urban archery for Progress Park. But I've actually, we talked to the executive director of the Game and Inland Fisheries while we were in Richmond, Mr. Brown, and he hooked us up with Mr. Basinger here, or Bassinger, or however you pronounce it. But I spoke with him today, and he said since it is county property versus being in the city limits or the town limits, that the hunting season's there, it would just be up to the board if we want to open it up. We can restrict it to bow hunting, we can restrict it to bow and muzzle loading, however we want to do it. So the seasons is there, we just have to abide by the rules by the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, but we could open up archery for that area. And he recommended something needed to be done because the population of the deer is really multiplying quickly.
I would recommend two things, Mr. Chairman. One is that we ask the JIDA just to talk to all of the industries out there and just get input from them of any concerns they have. I don't think archery would have any concerns with any of them. And secondarily, we will be advertising for new lease on the property for the upcoming year. Currently, the lease states that no hunting is allowed on the property in any, so this is a good time to bring it up. We can put that into the lease next year. But that is one of the problems when you lease that out to the farmer or whatever. He has to be agreeing as well to allow people to come on his property with his cattle, with his gates, with his locks, whatever you've got in the process.
But there's no cattle on lot 24, correct?
There are no cattle on lot 24.
And one thing that, me and Mr. Smith have discussed before, if the county does a lottery, which we would have to do, is somehow set it up to give preference to, like veterans and disabled people. And I'm sure Mr. Smith's got the contacts and how best to do that.
Well, that's a good segue, Mr. Vaught, but when I was talking to the folks today, they have people on staff that would come out, and they would help us set up shooting zones, non-shooting zones, so we could restrict it straight to the wood line and keep everybody out of the fields. We could keep them away from the factories that's out there. One area that I think would be a good area is kind of behind Somic and Brewer Automotive, that valley it runs down. There's a lot of deer activity there. And then, of course, the wood lines at 32 and 35, I think is what it is. I forget the actual lot numbers, but there's opportunities for us, and the Department of Game and Indian Fisheries is all in support of it, and they said they would help us in any way that we needed them to. That's all I have.
What'd you say?
That's all I have.
Can
Me.
we charge in the water?
We can't.
Me, I want to talk a little more.
I did have one thing, I attended a key strategic partners meeting with Dr. Sprinkle, Dean Sprinkle, and Jennifer Apple. Mr. Manley was there. We were talking about tourism and economic development, and one thing that I brought up, and I thought about it several years ago when they started, the 21-yard sale, and then hearing Mr. Weaver refer to Route 11 as the Great Road. 21 is probably one of the worst roads in the county to have yard sales. But I mentioned about maybe having one on Route 11 and partnering with Smith County and Pulaski County. And, they seemed really receptive to it. I think Shane Terry had talked about, you know, it can almost grow into a regional thing. Of course, we all know how far Route 11 runs. And it really shocked me how much money that event brings into Worth County. So if you could get Blake to get with, who would be, would Shane or?
Yeah, as I recall, they were gonna bring it up the next tourism meeting, which is in the next week or two, if I heard correctly.
How much does Blake attend those, Mr. Barry?
I do not know he does, but I'll make certain he attends the next one to talk about it.
And Shane, Mr. Terry seemed like that he thought he could get it off the ground with, you know, not much funding. And like I said, definitely partnerships. We would have to pick, I know the Route 21 date is set, but my only request is they call it the Great Road Flea Market for Mr. Weaver. Mr. McRoberts?
I did forget one, the little road that goes up behind the firehouse to the green boxes.
Yeah.
If you don't do something to it, you're gonna have to put something to block the road off, 'cause there ain't gonna be no road. And all that mud is washing right down on that blacktop.
Yeah, it's in pretty bad shape.
All right.
It's got a piping under the road up there, but it ain't no good. It's full of mud. Might have Billy look at it. I know it ain't state road. Thank you, sir. I hope Shannon's in the bed when you get home.
Thanks, Steve.
Mr. Baker.
Mr. Chairman, I would request that Mr. Smith add one more thing to his list. In front of you is a subordination of rights agreement that I received today between that basically East Tennessee Natural Gas is granting their subordination of rights to Wythe County and to the Virginia Department of Transportation for Grouse Ridge Road.
Is this the final document?
I hope. This is the one that we've been waiting on, yes. And the information I got today is that it was been signed by East Tennessee Natural Gas. I would just request that you all authorize me to sign this as a grantee to accept the property. I'm assuming Mr. Farley
so
is
moved.
fine with it. Second.
Did you make a motion?
Did you say something?
So moved.
I'm not even gonna ask you for any discussion about it. Mr. Terry?
Ah,
Aye.
Thanks, sir.
Stacy.
Stacy.
Everybody that has ever driven on that road in the past 2 years.
That's a true story.
Anything else, Mr. Barrett?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman, I do believe that is all the business that I have.
Madam Clerk, do you have anything? Mr. Farley?
Yeah,
I don't have anything. I just reminded Stephen of something.
Yeah, the only thing, Mr. Chairman, if you all wanted a closed session agenda item for prospective industry, to get an update from this, for Project Panel from Mr. Manley, he is here and can give an update. There's not really any additional information at this time. But if y'all would like to have a brief update on what's going on, more than willing. Leave it up to you all.
I'm
I
fine.
talked to Mr. Manley
Yeah, I'm
yesterday, and I
fine.
don't, unless something's changed in the past 24 hours.
No problem. I want to make sure we haven't had a close on a couple lines. I want to let you know everything's, you know, still out there. Just want to make certain y'all felt like y'all were informed on it.
Absolutely.
There's nothing else to come before the
Wait a
board.
minute, I think we need to read this word for word.
We're adjourned.